Satan means whatever I'm looking at, whatever I want it to mean. It's on my forehead. It's me if I can get up on that highway. If it's me trying to save my air, my water, my trees, my wildlife. It's me on that cameraman. It's me right there in his watch. It's me in his brain. It's me right there on his ears. And when he shaves in the morning, I'm sitting right up underneath his razor. You dig? It's everything that human beings don't understand. It's all their fears. It's what they're not sure of. You dig what I'm saying? Satan to me would be God. You would be God to me. You dig? I could worship anything as God. Everything is God. The sun is God. The moon is God. Everything is God. Except them stupid fucking people who got that shit stuck up in their fucking heads and they won't get rid of it.
Pokemon world is a world of the demonic, of the satanic. But while you might not take it quite seriously, I assure you that demons take it quite seriously. Satan takes it quite seriously. Your children need to know there's a devil, and he hates them, and he wants to ruin their life.
Last year, New Jersey detective Paul Hart investigated one of the most brutal murders ever connected to heavy metal Satanism. Tommy Sullivan, just turned 14, murdered his mother and killed himself, with a violence the police described as demonic.
You're a minister in the Church of Satan, right?
No, not necessarily. That was something earlier. No.
In the studio is the Dark Lord Blood, who is a 7th-generation satanic worshiper. I mean, are all your friends Satanists?
No, I don't have any friends, but my acquaintances are, yeah.
Guns N' Roses, forget Guns N' Roses. You need to get into God and Moses.
Hail Satan! 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 Hail Satan!
Hello, I'm Bob Larson, host of the nationally syndicated talk show Talkback. My concern about Satanism is the result of research conducted to write my book, Satanism, the Seduction of America's Youth. What you're going to see on this video will be revealing, shocking, and for some of you, disturbing. But it's important information you need to know.
You know what? If there is a God, hopefully, that God is wise enough, which obviously he probably will be since he created all this fucking fantastic shit, that it's not going to punish you if you jerk off at night. Okay? I think we can get off, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be a forgiving God. It's going to be a understanding God. After all, he created us. I don't think it's going to be a God that's going to require us to worship and be obedient to these rules that men who allegedly worship him wrote down for us. And if it's not, is that God, if I'm wrong, fuck him. I don't want to be his fucking friend anyway. Okay, sure, man. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I lived out there until I was about 16. Then I moved to San Diego, California, and I went to high school out here in San Diego, where I'm currently at. And I made it up until about my junior year, the end of my junior year, and I got kicked out of my house. So I kind of like, it was basically in this dilemma: do I want to like go to school, which I hated, although I got good grades, or I stay at home with my girlfriend and not go to school. So talked to my guidance counselor, and he's like, why are you still in school, dude? Is this really a choice to you? He's like, just drop out. But back then in the 90s, computers, not a lot of stuff was online, but he's like, in the near future, these GEDs and this, blah, blah, these diplomas aren't going to mean a lot, and you can do it all online. But so I did it, took his advice, and pursued college for a while. Kind of lost interest in that. My dumb ass picked like psychology as a major because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I quickly realized that no interest in doing all these what do they call them? These required classes like your math, your English, or stuff like that. I just wanted to learn what I wanted to learn about. And unfortunately, to study psychology or to study any topic that I wanted to learn about or make a career in, I had to take all these prerequisites, all these bullshit classes that I could give two fucks about how to, do calculus. I'm never going to apply that in my real life, or at least not, very often. So I felt like I was wasting my time, and, life took over, moved around, started just enjoying life, and kind of lost interest in school. But I moved around to California and up to Washington and lived in Seattle for a while, Portland, Northern California. A lot of different jobs, a lot of different people, and that's kind of where I'm at. And now I'm back in San Diego because this is kind of like where I like it the best. So, it's enjoying life out here. Currently with the whole COVID-19 Corona bullshit, it's like, I lost my job and when America went down in lockdown back in like April or something, and basically up until maybe a month ago, been living pretty well off of the unemployment stimulus packages that we get. So I really, right now I've just been on like a 7-month vacation, paid vacation. So I've traveled around recently, and was up in Seattle and Washington for a while and visiting friends and stuff like that. And and then reality kicked in when they took all the free money away. It's like, what? So now I'm like back here to get a real job again, and my head's back in reality, and fantasy's over. So. For the last 10 years, pretty much. I did pursue more permanent, stable jobs, as career-oriented jobs, as I did one for an auto mechanic when I was in my early 20s. Realized really quickly that I love working on my own cars and building hot rods, but I do not like fixing other people's cars. I don't like getting up at 6 a.m. and getting dirty and coming home at 4, covered like transmission oil and shit. Nope. Now, if it's my hot rod, it's a different story. But so I lost interest in that, and the sushi chef was kind of something I fell into. I started off as a server, and I was bartending too. And place I worked at, wanted to open a sushi restaurant. We did, and I had a fascination for it. I liked really the art aspects of it more so than the actual culinary aspects. I liked more so the art display and stuff like that. It's kind of like bartending with fish, and the social interaction of having people sit in front of you and handing them food and talking to them and talking to whatever. I like that type of job. It didn't really feel like a job to me. It felt like more like a hobby. So I did that for about 10 years, and the way that ended was kind of funny. Being a white sushi chef, you have a lot of skepticism, right? Which was understandable. And I was trained in both traditional sushi, Japanese-oriented sushi, and American-style sushi since, well, I live in California, where the California roll came from, right? Just American bastardizations of traditional sushi plates. And, a lot of the places I worked at were owned by Japanese people. And in that profession, they kind of had a few things going against me. One, that I was white. 2, that I'm left-handed. Left-handed means that in traditional Japan culture, traditionally left-handed is frowned upon as being somewhere between retarded and a degenerate. So, pick which one you want to swing it to. And I have tattoos, which is traditionally in Japan is used to identify criminals for their crimes. So, when you have giant pitchfork tattoos and stuff like that, it just kind of, they kind of frown upon all 3 of those things. So, but I didn't, I worked my way up, and eventually how that ended, which was my last real career-oriented thing, was a troll from the internet actually figured out where I worked. I was a little too open about what I was doing, too many pictures and shit like that. They were able to pinpoint where I worked, called my work, and made false complaints that I harassed them, that they were a customer and came in, and they just basically, tried to get me fired. And I thought in a state like California, which is very liberal and progressive and open, that there's no way that would fucking happen. And sure shit, it worked, even though my immediate boss was like, dude, there's no evidence that you harass these people. We looked at the cameras. The person's not even there. They're fake email address, fake phone numbers. But the vice president of the company said, get rid of this guy. So I'm like, dude, that's bullshit. He's like, it's a right to work state. I said, yes, but one thing. In this termination paper, they said the fact that I'm a Satanist. Now, whether that's true or not, now the religious protection against the right to work states, you can't fire someone based on gender, based on sex, based on age, or religious preference. So I sued them, and it took 5 years for anything to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen. I went through 3 lawyers, and eventually we settled. So I got a pretty decent lump that I'm investing and stuff like that. So it was kind of a nice little surprise, Absolutely. California is not what it was maybe 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. It's gotten the whole, left movement and stuff like that, which, I'm not really political. I don't consider myself a Democrat or Republican. I don't consider myself conservative or liberal. I'm a conservative on some issues, liberal on some. I've considered myself centered, but even as just a centered person who thinks that they're kind of like mid-level, great, not really consider themselves political, it's becoming very overwhelming the fact that a lot of people out here are having to really compromise to the overwhelming left majority, to a point where it's intrusive and it's invading our personal space and our personal rights. If you just want to be left alone, even if you're allowed to leave other people alone and let them do what they want to do and have their opinions, it's not like that anymore. Now it's like, no, you're going to have to, the left, the overwhelming, these are kind of the extreme, scenarios, but it's getting to be real where it's an everyday problem that you'd have to take on someone else's political and moral views, even though it's considered to be more liberal. If you're not like that, then they're going to make your life hard. So a lot of people, I've lost gun rights and stuff like that. It's just, it's getting silly. Yeah, that was something that was came about when I was really young. I was 13, 14 when I stumbled into Satanism, and I became kind of disillusioned with my Catholic upbringing. But I wasn't really raised like really a hardcore Catholic. Like I didn't have to go to Catholic school. We went to church like every other weekend when my dad picked me up. It was like a weekend warrior, old Catholic, traditional guy. Great guy, great heart. But, by the time I was like maybe 10, I was just like, by the time when you start to question things, like you've already figured, okay, people lied to me about Santa Claus. That's bullshit. Okay. The disappointment that came when you realize it's your parents. Tooth Fairy, that out the window too. That's gone. What was the other one? Easter Bunny. No, that guy doesn't exist either. And you start applying critical thinking skills to all of these superstitions, which is what they are, and myths. And the next one on my list was Jesus. And I'm like, but that was like the taboo one. Like, okay, we lied to you about this one, lied to you about that one. It's like Clinton, I did not have sex with. Wait, okay, I did. No, but and it's just like that was the thing. Like, and I was like, what, this doesn't make any sense, And so I was already kind of disillusioned with Catholicism and Christianity in general. So I started looking at philosophies. Like, still a little too young to read like Nietzsche or stuff like that. But I started looking to like alternative philosophies. Didn't really want to press Satanism because at the time this was in the Satanic Panic in the late 80s, early 90s, where in America, probably the world, but America especially, everything you looked at was Satanism. Tabloids, satanic ritual abuse, and found underground dungeons with sacrifice ritual chambers, and you're like, what? Like, it was shocking, especially for someone my age, but I was fascinated, like, does really fucking people do that shit? No way. So I was like, well, I want to look into this shit. And I looked, didn't really get any very far, went to some new age bookstores. Even back then it was still hard to get any real information on Satanism. There was no internet. So there was like, you basically going through bookstores, and most people won't keep copies of like real Satanism, like say anything by Anton LaVey, the Satanic Bible, anything like that. So eventually I ran away from home one day at like the age of 13 and bumped into an older guy who was on the streets too. And he was like 17 and he kind of carried around a copy of the Satanic Bible. And he was like the equivalent of like a Jehovah's Witness of Satanism. The guy like would sit on the corner and preach Satanism. It's the weirdest fucking thing, right? During the Satanic Panic, I'm surprised he didn't get shot. But and so like I was okay, I'll read this, and I read it, and it was nothing like I was exposed to like from TV and media and stuff. And it basically was an atheistic philosophy that focused on critical thinking and self-preservation and being individual rights and individual freedoms, and taught me that it's okay to indulge in your desires if it's not hurting other people. I mean, you're your own person, you're your own God. You just one life, live it to the fullest to make you happy. And I was like, that kind of makes a lot more fucking sense than this other shit I was reading and taught. So that's kind of how that went. I just kind of rolled with it from there. And it wasn't until late 2000s where the internet, like social media, really started to take off, like YouTube, where I saw, I mean, I went through my rebellious phase, my, oh, fuck God, fuck Christians, burn churches. But that lasted for like 2 years. Like, when I was a teenager, that would have happened about anything. And once I, matured a little bit, I saw YouTube as a vehicle that I could use to actually promote what Satanism really is before a lot of other people did it. And, I just started doing that, and I got onto YouTube to basically educate people what real Satanism was about. And then after a while, because there wasn't really a lot of competition back then. There's only a handful of people doing it. And I felt like I can do it better. And some of these people weren't even doing it correctly, like not even explaining what Satanism was. Then that kind of took off into like, when I had nothing to talk about, because honestly, Satanism is so basic, and it's trapped in mystery, but really, realistically, you could sit down and explain it in one video. So I ran out of shit to say, and then I started making funny videos about drugs, my experiences, and that got more popular even than the Satanism. And so then my channels kind of broke off into different branches and stuff like that.
I was obsessed with werewolves, man. I wanted to turn myself into a werewolf. And this is what I did.
What does he want? He wants pussy, and he wants cocaine.
Well, at first I couldn't really help him on the pussy part, right, you know? But I eventually did.
You know, I really hate Christmas. I'll tell you why.
I welcome you into my life as my Lord and Savior.
Is that good? Alright, now piss off.
I've done enough drugs to kill about 5 elephants, so I think kind of like, you know, can retire and keep it on the down low. This question comes from all sorts of people. Kids, adults, Nigerians. And I always ask them, Zach, how do you sell your soul? Problem is there is no devil.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I forgot to mention the name Satan. How that came up is Satan. Traditionally, it isn't in certain cultures. He's looked at as being the personification of evil. Right? He's the evil. He is the one that owns hell, is burning fire, and you know, blah blah blah. That's in the United States, coming from England, right? And so basically, that's that version of Satan. And Satan, if you go back further than that, is actually a judge. It means the adversary. The adversary means, you know, to be adversarial, and it's a judger. He's the accuser. But he's also, in like a more Milton type of way, he's also a misunderstood, you know, romantic. He's also one that has sympathy for man and enlightened man. You know, he's one that tempted man, right, for enlightenment, because he wants to be like man. Like Al Pacino says, "I'm a fan of man," like in that movie, what it's called, that movie. Like that's another version of Satan, which we also identify as being more of a, you know, who represents strength, wisdom, carnality, passion, desire, you know, and rebellion, and not evil, not hurting people, not anything to do with animals or kids or anything like that. So, but there are a very small percentage of people that identify themselves as Satanists that choose to believe in the biblical sense of Satan, but also see him maybe as not necessarily being an evil God, but one that is just a different God, one that's, you know, the enemy of God, but not necessarily a bad God, and he's not there to, you know, punish them. He's basically a misunderstood, like kind of like Lucifer more so. You know, some people believe that tongue in cheek, that it's real, that Satan is a real deity, but just misunderstood, and that if they worship him, that, you know, they'll obviously go to a different heaven that's not full of fire where you suffer for all eternity, but it's just a different type of heaven. I don't necessarily prescribe to that, but there are people that do, and they are the, you know, minority of people, although they're a very vocal percentage of people that get a lot of attention, because what they have to say is a lot more shocking than what I'm telling you I believe in. Because what I'm telling you I believe in, a lot of people will be like, pretty close to what I believe too. And it's like, yeah, and then that doesn't make for good news. You know, good news is I worship the devil and come out with blood all over you and shit. That makes for good fucking news. So that's what you're gonna hear most of. I like what when I was on a Comedy Central in 2013, I think, with the Anthony Jeselnik show on Jeselnik Offensive, my skit on Satanism there. I like what he said first. He described Satanism in one sentence. He goes, "Satanists are atheists in Halloween costumes." And I thought to myself, it's fucking right, genius. You know. So yeah, it's basically, it's if you strip away the aspects of the magic and the rituals and stuff, which is put there for different reasons. Most Satanists don't really believe in doing ritual and magic. I mean, some do, and it's kind of a fallback on older types of left-hand path and occult studies and practices. But more realistically, it's just to pump it up a little bit, to make it more interesting. It's basically a very basic atheistic philosophy of it revolves around the self. It revolves around indulging in your desires as long as they don't hurt other people, you know, that don't deserve to be hurt. It's a very, very animalistic thing where it's like, you know, law of the jungle, might is right, lex talionis, where, you know, it's you know, if someone smashes you, if someone hits you on the cheek, smash them on the other. You know, you don't turn the other cheek. You know, treat people with love and kindness and respect that treat you with love, kindness, respect. But hate your enemies with a full heart, because they are there to do you nothing but suffer. And you know, I mean, again, take that with a grain of salt. We don't go around beating people with sticks, you know, that piss us off. But might not be such a bad idea though, actually. But yeah. So basically, it's really about that. It's an atheistic philosophy that's about the self and about natural, common sense things. About our morals don't come from God or a book or our religious oppressors or politicians or whatever. We have basic instincts and morals that guide us as human animals that we should follow and that dictate our lives and that we should live by.
That scare you?
A little bit.
Zach, you're listed as one of the top 3 Satanists in the country. Who ranks Satanists? Is it BuzzFeed?
You know, a lot of it depends on Google and your exposure.
What is the difference between a Church of Satan member and a libertarian atheist magician?
The Church of Satan has a fancy membership red card that they send you if you pay the $200 membership fee.
That's the only difference.
Actually, I'll give you a great deal, $100 my PayPal.
What if I don't believe in PayPal?
Oh, well, I do accept money orders.
Money orders?
Yes.
Why is your religion not thriving? So what is a Satanist?
A Satanist is pretty much an atheist, but is more adversarial, and we deeply despise organized religion.
Would you say that religious people are dumb?
Yes.
Would you say it right now?
Religious people are dumb.
All right, let's say it at the same time.
1,
2.
Religious people are dumb.
Absolutely, and I totally understand why Styx did that. Styx and I were one of the first Satanists on YouTube. There's also some more, but yeah, him and I used to talk a lot back when we were running the Satanism thing back in the back like 2010, 2011, way back when. And yeah, I like the guy, and you know what, he's absolutely right. And there's been a lot of times where I don't necessarily I identify myself as Satanism, as you can see, but I don't wear my medallion out that in the open that often unless there's a reason to, just because it is a limited philosophy. It's kind of, I dare say it, kind of an immature way, underdeveloped sense if you're going to be a practitioner of the left-hand path and of Satanism. Well, not just Satanism, left-hand path and the occult. Satanism, you kind of pigeonhole yourself a little bit if you stick to the atheistic aspects of it, because just like, people who believe in God and say, I know for certain that there's a God, well, you really don't. And, the exploration of the occult, and especially the left-hand path, is about self-improvement through knowledge and through yourself instead of looking to external means. But, so yeah, atheistic Satanism is a little bit limited. And I still consider myself a Satanist, but I don't necessarily identify with, say, traditional LaVeyan Satanism or atheistic Satanism, definitely not theistic Satanism. So yeah, I would definitely, I kind of walked that route a while ago, a little after Styx did, but I just wasn't as vocal about it. I also think Styx also may have done that for, because I think he sees not just the limitations on his personal development, but on his development on YouTube. And you're limiting yourself. If you're just going after audiences that are interested in Satanism, there's not a lot of people who are interested in Satanism. And there's a lot of people that are interested in the shit he's talking about now, though. So I think it was a good move on his part to kind of downplay that. I mean, is he still a Satanist? Absolutely. If you ask him, I mean, I'm sure if I asked him, he'd say yes. But yeah, it's not as big of a, it doesn't sit on his mantle anyway. I think he took down the upside down cross, like, you know what, and get a couple 100,000 more subscribers if I do that. And boom, genius. He did it. I almost did it too, but my ego went allow me. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But it's, I like the guy. To each his own.
All right, everyone, it's time to talk about being an ex or former Satanist. I can't say this enough because so many people who are more on like the Christian side, when I talk about like Trump or whatever, they conflate me with being a conservative. They often, if they're shilling, they try to defame me by saying I worship Satan or like I deny Pizzagate or something like that. So I've got to make it clear in its own dedicated video. I am a former Satanist. Around 2010, 2011, I was a self-proclaimed independent Satanist. First and foremost, never joined the Church of Satan, never even supported them. To tell the truth, thought it was gimmicky. I'll get into that a little bit. Never joined the Temple of Set with Aquino or any of these people. Was never a member of any actual order. About the only group that I even kind of admired was the Satanic Empire, the United Satanic Empire run by Bowersox. And I mean, Jack Winners, Bowersox, was a different individual. And I was never a member of their group either.
Sure. Basically, I had interviewed Lucien Greaves, Doug Meisner, whatever he wants to call himself these days. And, I interviewed him because he was in Satanism. I didn't find out about the Satanic Temple until I went on Comedy Central. And Comedy Central, it must have caught wind about the Satanic Temple because the opening thing was, on my skit was, in New York, Satanists adopt a state highway. And they started asking me questions like I was a member of the Satanic Temple, and I wasn't. I hadn't even heard of Satanic Temple, and they're just like what? Adopted State Highway? What is that? I don't even. What the fuck are you talking about? And then they switched over. But anyway, it's like, yeah, that's when I heard about the Satanic Temple. I thought, oh, great. I heard about this Baphomet Monument. This is back before the Baphomet Monument was even built. They were still fundraising for it, and I got on board because I was like, great, these guys are actually making progress, and I didn't see the political aspects. I saw them fighting for separation of church and state. And I saw a very creative way that they were doing that by threatening to build a satanic Baphomet monument, which they did, because they wanted the Ten Commandments monuments taken down, because there was a violation of church and state to have a Ten Commandments monument on state grounds, on Capitol grounds, which it is. And they successfully did that. And it took a 7-foot tall bronze statue of this weird kind of pedo looking Baphomet with these weird kids standing next to it. And they did that. And I was like, can we just get rid of the kids? Okay, can we and then, it was like, I guess they said they wanted it to look like, the kids were like, it's just kind of a little too weird pedo shit, especially that we just got over the satanic panic, and most people now don't believe that Satanists are pedophiles and eat babies and shit anymore. And then here's this fucking monument of these kids. I'm like, oh man, you guys, how do you fuck this up? You're like at the center stage, and then it was like, the coloring books in school came along. I'm like, whoa, too much kid shit, guys. Kids, it's just lay off the kids things, man. There's too much emphasis. You want to do coloring books, satanic coloring books, and pass. They asked me to when I was at chapter to Portland. It's exactly when you chapter to Portland. You're in Portland. It's like, yes, I'll do that. Be the contact point, blah, 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 help do events and coordinate things. And it was like, here's one, satanic coloring books in school. I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because they're having these after school Christian things in school, and we don't feel that they should have after school Christian programs. It's like, why? Because then people aren't being forced to go to these things, by the way. So I'm like, why? And then they're like, well, we just want to have our own. So we want to show diversity and religious diversity. Like, so you want me to go to a public school, a grade school, and pass out these satanic coloring books and try to get kids to enroll in fucking school or into our satanic class to what? Do what? Bake cookies and color upside down crosses? No, dude, I'm not doing that. One, I'll get my fucking ass kicked. Unless you're going to have the police behind me, right? I'm not doing this, dude. I understand, but I got to draw the line with the kids. And that kind of set a little rough. And then I think one of the upper administrators, who no longer is there, Jex, I guess she was too edgy, sinister for them. She had a problem with me. That was a personal problem. I think maybe she thought at the time, maybe she thought that she was in a position to be like in power of the upper authority, and maybe she felt threatened because I was well known and she wasn't so much, and blah, blah, blah. Whatever the problem was, and it was a long time ago. I'm not even, butthurt about it, but it's like with that and everything. And then I started to see the political aspects where there's like this huge LGBT movement came in. And yes, Satanism does support the LGBT community, because we think that, sexuality is between consenting adults is their prerogative, right? And we shouldn't be able to impose laws upon that. But it became so oriented towards LGBT rights that the whole Satanism thing got put in the back burner. And now it's about, and then this whole thing with the kids, and they had drag queens wanting to do kids storytelling, but they have to be in drag. I'm like, guys, enough of the kids, enough of the gay stuff, all right? We would focus more on the separation of church and state, religious rights, sexual rights is fine too, but you're overemphasizing this. And now the Satanic Temple is almost 80% LGBT, and it's nothing wrong with that, but it's so focused on the left-wing agenda and also kind of more of extreme stuff that it's kind of making Satanism look stupid, and it's totally taking course off of Satanism and onto these these LGBT rights and stuff like that, which really doesn't have anything to do with Satanism. So it's kind of a farce, in my opinion. But that's kind of how I had it falling out with it. Well, I think that with the Satanic Temple, I think their steam kind of, is over, at least for the time being, unless they can think of another political stunt, which hopefully it won't involve kids. But if they keep harping on the kids and keep, constantly putting kids in their agenda, I think it's bad news. And, I honestly, though, for the public perception, if you have the Satanic panic where people are fearing Satanism because they don't understand, it's misunderstood, and they think that we're kill babies and sacrifice people and listen to death metal. Oh wait, a lot of us still do, but you know what I'm saying? If they think we're that type of Satanist, and they're afraid of us and they avoid us. I actually would rather the satanic panic be the common perception of Satanism than that we're a bunch of political activists, LGBT, left-wing, Antifa liberals. Between the two, I'll take the satanic panic. Bring back AC/DC and Rich Ramirez. Bring them. If I got to get on TV and sacrifice a fucking goat to end the perception that we're a bunch of LGBT liberal proactivists, right, passing out coloring books in school, I will get on TV and sacrifice a fucking goat, and I'll be Hail Satan. God loves you. Bye. That's it. Is it coming? I hope so. I hope so. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's been one of my hobbies is one of my kind of, I guess we'd call it a secondary interest in the Satanism is through art and through music, because that is the best way to influence people. It is the best way to get Satanism out there. Let's face it. There's not a lot of bookworms walking around Barnes and Noble, if they even exist anymore, fishing for the Satanic Bible. But if you can get, so we'll start with musicians. Musicians, since skip the Satanic Panic, most of your audience is probably too old, and I don't even remember that. But more modern stuff, like say for me, shortly after I was already developing Satanism, in the late '90s, you had Marilyn Manson, you had 9 Inch Nails. These are people that openly identified with Satanism, and these are people that got a lot of airplay. People, especially Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson probably ushered in more people into Satanism than Anton LaVey, who wrote the Satanic Bible, just because of the massive amounts of media and his shock appeal. And him getting the philosophy of Satanism out, even though it's kind of in a barbaric kind of, artistic kind of creepy, goofy way. A lot of people I've met, got their first impression or get that spark got lit through Marilyn Manson, because they're like, loved his music and they wanted to understand what he was writing and wanted to understand what he was talking about. And unfortunately, well, I understand why, but like Marilyn Manson, I mean, a lot of people who are Marilyn Manson fans will say he was never a Satanist, and then it's like, really? Because there's pictures of them with Anton LaVey. Like, nobody gets to meet Anton LaVey. Like, that's a fucking honor, right? So it's be like, this guy's not a Catholic, but he's standing there next to the Pope. It's like, oh, well, okay, you debate that all you want. And it's like, oh, and then his autobiography, there's a whole chapter about his involvement in the Church of Satan. Oh, well, let's just discredit that. Oh, he talks about it, in interviews, and he talks about it in songs. So it's like, for them to say that he's not a Satanist is because they don't understand what Satanism is. So their idol that they idol can't possibly be this creepy fucking Satanist, because they don't understand what Satanism is. But there's some people that will get exposed to that and will actually take the time to pursue and understand what it is. And it opens up the floodgate, basically. He opened up a floodgate for hundreds of thousands of people to get exposed to that philosophy. And out of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that he opened it up to, even if, a couple thousand actually took the time and study and pursue it, well, then you have a couple thousand more. More recently, I mean, then there's a whole death metal movement, right? The whole death metal, again, it's kind of like the Marilyn Manson thing, except Marilyn Manson did it on a large level because he got a lot of airplay. Sold millions of albums, whereas most death metal musicians don't get any airplay. They don't sell millions of albums, right? Most of them, I've seen a lot of these bands come to, the show in a fucking U-Haul, right? That they rented to go tour the West Coast because, they're just not making a lot of money. It's too small of a group. But a lot of people get exposed to Satanism through death metal too, and black metal. I'm not really a fan of either one. People are like, that's blasphemy. How could you just be a Satanist and not like death metal? It's like, I can't understand what he's saying, and it's just too loud and too much. Because I'm fucking old, that's why. Give me some Pantera, Metallica, but fucking Deicide, oh, it's too much. But no, I'm joking. I like some of it, but not much. But anyway, yeah, death metal's a big one. Most recently, Ghost. Ghost is the next Marilyn Manson. This band is Tobias Ford's Papa Emeritus. I got to meet him, and he's the real McCoy, and he's talking about real Satanism. His influence is like heavily by like King Diamond, very orchestrated, very kind of like theatrical. But yeah, Ghost. Mad props to Tobias Ford and whatever. It's that's the next one. The Ghost is probably the most prolific satanic band in history, next to the Rolling Stones. But see, the Rolling Stones are more, especially nowadays that they're old and retired, they started downplaying their involvement in Satanism in the 70s. But Ghost is still up, and pretty much you can watch interviews with him on YouTube, and he's like, they ask him about Satanism. He's like, are you a Satanist? And they expect him to say like no, or downplay it like Marilyn Manson does. Marilyn Manson will say, well, at a time I listened to LaVey and Nietzsche, and Marilyn Manson downplayed his involvement because at a certain point, these musicians, when they have the ability to be multimillionaires and to sell millions of albums. Satanism doesn't sell. You're going to disillusion a lot of your fans, although you made it because of that. Now, if you're going to be selling to millions instead of thousands, if you're going to millions, you might want to drop the Satanism thing. And I think their producers or their people that are in charge of their, public perception are telling them to drop it, because a lot of satanic fans will drop it, like Marilyn Manson, or downplay it, even though in their early days, it was something that they're very vocal about. Ghosts won't do that, and they haven't really yet, so that's pretty cool. So basically, with the Rolling Stones, and they're pretty tight-lipped about it in the media. Back in when the Rolling Stones came out in the '60s, and they started getting big in the mid '60s. Back during the time in America, the Rolling Stones were kind of emulating, or wanted to really have an American audience. A lot of their music was geared, because they're from the UK. They wanted to be the blues band of the UK. They had a lot of influence from the United States, mainly in blues. And when they came here and started touring a lot in the United States, I'm not sure about the UK, but there's what they call the occult explosion took place in the 60s and 60s and early 70s. And a lot of, occult was being sensationalized and being exposed to. A lot of, the media was actually picking it up on it in a big way for the first time. And a lot of musicians reflected that. Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones. With the Rolling Stones, though, there was a little bit more of a direct connection, in the sense where, you can see aspects of it, whereas the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger did the music effects for a film called Invocation to My Demon Brother and Lucifer's Rising. I don't remember which one or both, but it was one of those two. They were kind of billed as the same movie, but that was produced by a guy named Kenneth Anger, who's still alive, and he was one of the original founding members, not founding members, but he's one of the original, what they call the Circle of Nine and the Church of Satan. So he was instrumental. He was like one of the very first Satanists artists, was Kenneth Anger. You can see his films like Invocation to My Demon Brother, Lucifer's Rising. Mick Jagger just happened to be doing the sound effects. Wait a minute. It's like, wait a minute. It's fucking, famous musician from the UK, the Rolling Stones, just happens to be in like this fucking super duper like occult production. And their songs kind of reflect that too. Like in 1966, the year the Church of Satan was formed, they released a song called wasn't the shit. Now I'm gonna make it confused. 1966, they released a song called damn it. No, okay, I'm confused now. 1969, they released the year the Satanic Bible was released. Is what I meant to say. They released a song called "Sympathy for the Devil." Yeah. In 1966, they released an album called "Their Satanic Majesty's Request." Not a big album. You don't hear a lot of that, but in 1966, the year the Church of Satan was formed, they released an album called "Their Satanic Majesty's Request." And in the background, they did a parody of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club type album, but they had like Aleister Crowley's face in it. They had like known like kind of occultic things, and they're kind of so their obvious occult attachments were there. There was a song called "Paint It Black," stuff like that. "Sympathy for the Devil," by the way, that was released when the year the Satanic Bible was released to the public. I mean that song itself, the depiction where they talk about the devil and they talk about him, and you read the lyrics and listen to the song again. In hindsight, if you want to, if somebody wants to do that who's listening, you'll see they're painting a romanticized version of the devil, who is there for rebellion. He's there to help man. That version of Satan, the devil, "Sympathy for the Devil," the way Mick Jagger articulates it in that song, is kind of how we look at Satan in a metaphorical way, not as the evildoer, but as a leader of rebellion, a leader of truth and freedom, and a lost, a hopeless romantic type. And that's kind of what he sings about in the song. So there's that connection, and then the movie connections. Again, like the Rolling Stones, when they had the opportunity to become, the world's largest, biggest rock and roll band, which they're one of my favorite rock and roll bands in all time. They had that choice. You want to keep dabbling in the occult, or do you want to go and be a multi-billionaire? I mean, I can't blame the guys. So that's what happened. And then, there's Led Zeppelin, who, at least Jimmy Page had, dabbled in the occult, bought Aleister Crowley's houses, thought there was like, mystical properties or magical properties. all this information has been filtered through media, through all this and that. But there was a real interest in the occult for a lot of people and artists too, in the 60s and 70s. When we were talking about like Tim Burton's. There's I'm skipping ahead a little too far. Back in the mid 70s, or I think is the mid 70s. There's a small, very unknown, or very not popular movie called The Devil's Reign. And The Devil's Reign, what was unique about this movie is it actually had Anton LaVey in it, and he actually had a cameo in it, and he actually had a couple lines, nothing that you would notice, but to people that were in the movie itself was what is spectacular. The movie itself is kind of hokey pokey, but it's I like it, but you got to be, it's a cult classic at this point, and if you got to be into cult B movies to really appreciate the artistic value, because that's it's just so campy, it's almost funny. But there's a lot of actual real Satanism in it. There's a lot of stuff taken directly from books like the Satanic Rituals and stuff that were added into it. Who started it though? It was William Shatner's debut film. Like, he had already been in Star Trek, but William Shatner was the leading actor. Classic Shatner acting. If you're a Shatner fan and like that type of acting, which I am, that you can't get any better than The Devil's Reign. And it's like, why would they pick William Shatner? It's like, okay, well, maybe he just really wanted to get into movies, right? Okay, maybe that was coincidence. But John Travolta, that was his first film ever. John Travolta was in that fucking no-name B movie that was produced by a bunch of Satanists. How did that happen? I do not know. I mean, is this all coincidence? Could be. Ernest Borgnine played the devil. He also did the voiceover for SpongeBob. And Ernest Borgnine, big actor back in the day. Ida Lupino, Tom Skerritt, big actors. This is like it was a low-budget film produced by a bunch of Satanists, but had huge fucking actors in it. And it's like were they doing it for favors? Were they, or were the people who were making this film are doing them a favor? Like John Travolta's first film, William Shatner's first film. It's like, is there a connection? Speculative. I mean, I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm kind of connecting dots. So, I mean, obviously, some of the dots don't really connect. Them drawing lines to them like a schizophrenic guy, makes all these connections that really aren't there. But it's possible. But yeah, it's worth taking a note at. Rosemary's Baby. In that film, that's definitely Roman Polanski, I think was what it was. There were times in parts of that film, there was some real Satanism going on. I don't know what, it doesn't mean that. Now, when I say it's a satanic film, it doesn't mean everybody in the movie is Satanist. It doesn't mean everybody who writes about it is Satanist. It means that there's somebody who is orchestrating, and same with musicians, that is aware of what real Satanism is and is using Satanism and its applied technologies and things called lesser magic, which is the applied application of certain principles to motivate, to stimulate, and to subtly influence people on a mass level through media. And there are techniques that people use that could only be learned through certain books, and these certain books are only really read by occultists. And so when I identify groups like, say, Marilyn Manson, he's a little too obvious, but let's say the Rolling Stones, there are techniques that they still use to this day, and even at least two of the most recent albums, that tell me that they're Satanists, not because they wear an upside down, not because they wear a Baphomet medallion, or not because they have tattoos, not because they're like Marilyn Manson and are way over the top, but because I can identify certain techniques and aspects of lesser magic that they also are using consistently. I'm not talking about like one song, like say Sympathy for the Devil. That doesn't make them Satanists. We'll exclude the fact that they've been involved in various satanic movies and stuff produced by Satanists. I'm talking about the continuous applications of principles of lesser magic that they use over and over and over. And it's been decades of doing this, not just song, not just one album, even decades of it. And they're continuing to do it to this day. Does that mean everybody that all the Rolling Stone members are Satanists? Absolutely not. It doesn't mean that. It means it's whoever's writing these lyrics is, or whoever's producing their albums and is responsible for their album covers for a lot of things is. That's all I'm saying. So it's not that I'm like, out here pointing and be like, my favorite bands are Satanists. This guy, no. What I mean? It's somebody who has an influence in that band, somebody who's writing the lyrics is. So yeah, okay. So Lesser magic is different from greater magic. Greater magic is pretty much defined as like ritualistic magic, where you have the ceremony, the altar, you have the chants, incantations, the gong, whatever it is, right, that they use to, usually it's to summon forces. Greater magic. That's what greater magic is. When people think of magic and ritual, they're thinking of greater magic. Lesser magic is also considered to be a form of magic. Magic being the ability to change your situation or environment according to one's will that would normally not be changeable. Lesser magic is the applied application of psychology, sociology, principles of human understanding to your own desired outcome. Basically, subtle influencing people through subliminal messages is a good point. That's one aspect of it. And when you look at musicians who have at their disposal be able to write songs, be able to interject echoes, to be able to interject outside stimuluses through various frequencies and tones that are known to make people more malleable, formable, to be, basically it's a form of subconscious manipulation. And that is lesser magic. It's also applied to on a level, but a more general level, like subliminal advertising. That's a form of lesser magic. Although the people who are using those are using very primitive forms of it that are can be learned about anywhere, even in marketing classes at college, right? But the techniques that I'm talking about are so specific that only people who have read these books, or people who have read these books that have told these people, are using them. Like you would never know. And unfortunately, I can't really divulge exactly what they are, because it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you're in the know, you don't tell. The people that tell actually really don't know. It's a secret, basically. Like, it's the whole power of being a secret, is that it's secret, right? If I talk about it, then it devalues the meaning of it. People won't believe it. And two, it's detracting from the people that have taken their lifetime learning these secrets. So, but I can basically say, without kind of giving it all away, and it's taken me decades to learn and study, without offending anybody also who's using it in their works, because it would be robbing from them too, is that it's basically the applied principles of understanding of human motivation and personality, and using certain things, even as far as like frequencies and their tones of music, but even the more overt ones, with stuff like this behind me, but not in such an overt way, to kind of influence people to be more susceptible to their general message, which is of a satanic origin. But that general message isn't go kill your cat. It's not to fuck Christianity. It's a more of a general message as to live your life to the fullest, as to open up, as to grow according to the will of us. It gets a little sinister, and I could go into it more, but then it kind of sounds like I'm contradicting myself, because we're not misunderstood nice guys. And that's really nothing nice guy type thing. I don't want to whitewash Satanism, because it's not really about that, but it's definitely an interesting thing that I've been studying. I call it the diabolical infestation. It's musicians being placed in positions of power. Power is in like Marilyn Manson, Ghost, to name a few, Rolling Stones, that can have the ability to influence millions and millions of people, and they do. And the people who do it using consistent applications of techniques that they would only learn from certain occult books are the people that I'm identifying as Satanists.
So I've been asked to remake this video, 30 hits of LSD. Here's what happened is, I was working at this coffee shop back like 10 years ago on Mill Avenue in Tempe. And at the end of the night, I would put all the pastries and shit outside next to the dumpster instead of throwing them in the dumpster so all the homeless kids could go and, pick through them and shit. And I wasn't supposed to. You were supposed to throw them in the dumpster and lock the dumpster, but I said fuck that, because they were always gone in the morning by the time the boss got home, or got to work, so. Anyway, I was walking down, gonna catch the bus, and this hippie guy comes up to me, and I don't remember his name, but I'm familiar with his face. He's like, thanks man for the fucking food all the time, and he was high as fuck. He's like, you want a fucking trip tonight, man? And I was like, I was off the next day or two, so I was like, sure man. He's like, open your mouth. And stupidly I did, and he had an eyedropper, and he squirted a bunch of fucking acid in my mouth. Like, I could feel it. And you're not supposed to. I could feel the shit running down the back of my throat. And I was like, dude, what the fuck? He's like, oh man, you're gonna be high. That was like 20 or 30 hits of acid, man. And he was right, because I used to, back when I sold acid, you know, I used to use an eyedropper to put the drops on individual hits, and an eyedropper will hold about 20 to 30 hits. So I knew I was in trouble. So my goal was to get back to my house as soon as possible before the shit kicked in, right? Because I didn't know what to expect on that many hits. I'd never taken more than like 3 or 4 at a time. And 3 and 4, you're pretty high. Well, I got on the fucking bus and it kicked in. You know, usually it takes like an hour to kick in and shit. No, this kicked in like 20 minutes. So I'm kind of fucked. And you know how like when you're on acid, like, you know, shit kind of breeze, you know, the colors are brighter, you know, you see tracers and shit. Not on 20 or 30 hits you don't. You lose your fucking mind, man. Like I almost went blind. I was hallucinating so hard. I was seeing just shit like melt before my eyes. I couldn't read. My whole frame of vision was like constantly like shifting like that. I was like, what the fuck? And I missed my bus stop because I was high as fuck. I got off at the wrong bus stop, and I was only like maybe a mile away from my house, right? But I was so high I couldn't even fucking walk straight, man. I ended up sitting next to the canal, talking to myself until the sun came up. And I peaked for like 5 or 6 hours, man. Not like 1 or 2 hours, like with a couple hits. I peaked like at least 5 or 6 hours. I lost all concept of reality and time. It was quite spiritual, and I wasn't really scared though because I knew it was just a drug. So I was more worried that I couldn't find my way home, and it took me like 8 hours to like, which should have taken me like 20 minutes, but I made it. And I was high for like 2 days. It kind of sucked. I started to get worried after a while because I was like, am I ever gonna not be high again? And so yeah, that was my experience. I don't recommend taking that much LSD. It's probably unhealthy. I don't think I've been right ever since. I got like a tick now.